In a world filled with complicated personalities, few are as challenging and as fascinating as the narcissist. Whether it's a partner, a parent, a friend, or even a colleague, dealing with someone who thrives on control, admiration, and superiority can be emotionally draining. Yet beneath the arrogance and manipulation often lies something deeply human, a fragile sense of insecurity masked by a powerful facade. In Disarming the Narcissist, therapist Wendy Behary doesn't simply tell us how to survive such relationships. She teaches us how to transform them. With years of clinical experience and profound psychological insight, Behary offers tools for setting healthy boundaries, maintaining self-respect, and communicating effectively with narcissistic individuals without losing your peace or self-worth. This isn't a book about fighting back or proving them wrong. It's about learning how to stay grounded, assertive, and compassionate, even in the presence of someone who constantly seeks control. By understanding the narcissist's hidden fears and unmet needs, we can protect ourselves while creating space for more authentic and respectful interactions. So, if you've ever felt manipulated, unheard, or emotionally exhausted by someone who always has to be right, this book is for you. Together, we'll uncover the psychology behind narcissism and learn how to disarm it with insight, empathy, and strength. If you find this summary insightful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful book breakdowns every week. Chapter 1. Understanding the Narcissist. Before we can learn to disarm a narcissist, we must first learn to understand them. Wendy Behary begins by peeling back the psychological layers that form the narcissistic personality. A combination of deep insecurity, excessive self-focus, and an unquenchable thirst for validation. At first glance, narcissists appear confident, often charismatic, bold, and self-assured. They dominate conversations, crave admiration, and resist criticism. But as Behary explains, this grandiosity hides something fragile, a wounded self-esteem built upon early emotional deprivation, unmet needs, or experiences of conditional love. The narcissist's constant need to feel superior is not born of arrogance alone. It is a defense mechanism against shame and vulnerability. What makes narcissists so difficult to deal with is their emotional armor. They are hypersensitive to criticism, yet they mask it with anger or indifference. They project their insecurities onto others, twisting reality to maintain their sense of control. Engaging with them often feels like walking on eggshells. You never know when a small disagreement might trigger a storm of defensiveness. Behary encourages us to view this not as an excuse for their behavior, but as a key to understanding it. Seeing the narcissist as emotionally fragile rather than purely malicious allows us to approach them with compassion and strategy. This awareness helps us step out of emotional reactivity and into clarity, which is the first step toward disarming their power over us. The heart of this chapter is the reminder that narcissism is a schema, a deeply ingrained pattern formed in childhood. It's not about ego for its own sake, but about survival. And by understanding that, we begin to see the narcissist not just as a tormentor, but a person trapped in their own unmet needs. Chapter 2. The Hidden Wounds Beneath the Mask. In this chapter, Wendy Behary takes us deeper into the emotional landscape of the narcissist. Behind the arrogance, manipulation, and need for control lies a wounded child, Someone who, at some point in life, learned that love must be earned and that vulnerability invites pain. Behary explains that many narcissists grew up in environments where their worth was tied to performance, perfection, or admiration. They were praised for achievements, beauty, or intelligence, but rarely loved simply for who they were. Others may have faced neglect or emotional abandonment, forcing them to build a false self, an inflated image of confidence designed to protect their fragile core. This false self becomes both a shield and a prison. It protects them from the unbearable feelings of inadequacy, but isolates them from authentic connection. Narcissists crave admiration because it feeds this false self, yet they sabotage intimacy because it threatens to expose their insecurities. The paradox is heartbreaking. Beneath their dominance lies fear. Beneath their control lies shame. And beneath their charm lies loneliness. Behary reminds us that while their behavior can be hurtful and manipulative, it often stems from a desperate attempt to maintain emotional safety in a world they perceive as threatening. For those dealing with a narcissist, whether in relationships, family, or the workplace, understanding these hidden wounds changes the game. It doesn't excuse their actions, but it allows you to respond with strategic empathy, a balance of compassion and boundaries. Instead of reacting emotionally, you begin to see their attacks as symptoms of pain rather than personal betrayals. Behary's insight here is powerful. Empathy without boundaries leads to self-destruction, but boundaries without empathy lead to escalation. The key is learning to stay grounded, to see through the mask without being pulled into their emotional chaos. Chapter 3: The Power Struggle: Breaking Free from the Narcissist's Control. In Chapter 3 of Disarming the Narcissist, Wendy Behary turns our focus to one of the most exhausting dynamics in dealing with narcissists: the constant power struggle. A relationship with a narcissist, whether romantic, familial, or professional, often feels like walking through a minefield. Every disagreement becomes a test of loyalty. Every boundary feels like a declaration of war. Narcissists cannot easily tolerate being wrong or vulnerable. To them, losing control equals losing identity. Behary describes how narcissists use emotional manipulation, gaslighting, guilt-tripping, or blame-shifting to maintain dominance. They twist facts, rewrite history, and make you question your memory or worth. The goal is simple: to keep you in a reactive state so you remain emotionally dependent and uncertain of yourself. Yet, Behary offers a liberating perspective. Power struggles only thrive when you fight them on the narcissist's terms, through anger, pleading, or over-explaining. The secret, she says, lies in detachment with dignity. You can't win a shouting match with someone whose self-esteem depends on being right, but you can step out of the game. She encourages readers to recognize the schemas, deep emotional patterns that the narcissist triggers within them. Maybe you feel the urge to please, to fix, to prove your worth, or to avoid conflict. These internal responses keep you trapped. When you identify them, you reclaim your emotional freedom. In practice, this means speaking firmly but calmly, setting limits without hostility, refusing to be drawn into emotional traps. Behary even suggests preparing scripts for difficult interactions, short, confident statements that protect your boundaries and stop manipulation before it begins. But most importantly, she emphasizes that breaking free doesn't always mean ending the relationship. Sometimes it's about shifting the emotional power, learning how to interact in ways that preserve your sanity and self-respect. Chapter 4: Healing the Emotional Wounds: Reclaiming Your Power. In this chapter of Disarming the Narcissist, Wendy Behary invites us to look inward, to the emotional scars that keep us entangled with narcissists. While it's easy to focus on the narcissist's behavior, Behary reminds us that real transformation begins when we understand our own reactions to them. Many people who find themselves repeatedly drawn to narcissists share a common thread: deep, unhealed emotional schemas. These are the unconscious patterns that drive how we think, feel, and respond. For example, the approval-seeking schema pushes us to please others even at our own expense. The subjugation schema makes us suppress our needs to avoid conflict. The defectiveness schema whispers that we're not good enough, so we tolerate mistreatment. When a narcissist enters the picture, these schemas are activated, like old wounds being poked. They exploit our empathy, guilt, and desire for harmony, not always out of malice, but out of their own psychological need for validation. Behary teaches that recognizing these internal patterns is the first step to healing. Once you see the emotional buttons that get pushed, you can stop reacting automatically. You move from survival mode to conscious choice. To aid this process, she introduces the method of schema therapy, which integrates cognitive, behavioral, and emotional tools. Through visualization, self-talk, and guided imagery, you can begin to reparent yourself, giving your inner child the validation, love, and protection it always needed. For example, when a narcissist tries to belittle you, instead of collapsing or over-defending yourself, you might pause, breathe, and remind your inner self, "I deserve respect. Their anger doesn't define my worth." She calls this empathic confrontation, standing firm with compassion, both for yourself and for even the narcissist's inner pain. This doesn't mean excusing bad behavior. It means understanding that their cruelty stems from fear and fragility. Over time, this awareness shifts the balance. You become less reactive, more grounded, and emotionally independent. The narcissist loses control not because you fight back harder, but because you no longer feed their need for dominance. Chapter 5. The Power of Empathic Confrontation. Setting Boundaries with Strength and Compassion. In this pivotal chapter of Disarming the Narcissist, Wendy Behary explores one of the most powerful tools for dealing with narcissistic individuals: empathic confrontation. It's not about arguing, submitting, or walking away in silence. It's about communicating in a way that protects your boundaries while still acknowledging the humanity of the other person. Behary explains that narcissists are driven by a fragile inner world, one built on insecurity, fear of shame, and the constant need for validation. When confronted harshly or accused directly, they respond with defensiveness, anger, or withdrawal. But when approached with calm confidence and empathy, the narcissist's walls can begin to soften. The key, Behary emphasizes, is tone and intent. Instead of saying, "You're selfish and never listen," which triggers defensiveness, you might say, "I understand that you want to be heard and respected, and I do too. When you interrupt me, I feel dismissed. Can we try to hear each other out?" This approach doesn't mean giving in or excusing harmful behavior. It means speaking from emotional maturity, refusing to mirror their aggression, and keeping control of your own reactions. It's strength without hostility, clarity without cruelty. Behary notes that empathic confrontation requires 3 core skills. 1. Self-regulation, learning to manage your own emotional triggers before responding. 2. Empathy for the narcissist's vulnerability,
recognizing that their arrogance often hides deep insecurity. 3. Assertive communication, expressing your needs clearly without guilt or apology. For example, instead of retreating when criticized, you might calmly respond, "I hear that you're upset with how things went. I'd like to understand your point, but I also want to share how I experienced it." This form of dialogue disrupts the narcissist's power play. It forces them gently but firmly to engage as equals rather than as controllers. And while not every narcissist will change, Behary reminds us that empathic confrontation shifts your dynamic. It gives you power and peace. Over time, using this approach can lead to subtle changes in the relationship. The narcissist may become less reactive, more open to feedback, or at least more respectful of your boundaries. But even if they don't, you will have reclaimed your emotional freedom, no longer living under their shadow. Chapter 6. Reclaiming Your Identity, Finding Yourself Beyond the Narcissist. In this chapter of Disarming the Narcissist, Wendy Behary shifts the focus inward once again, toward reclaiming your sense of self after being entangled with a narcissistic person. Whether the narcissist was a partner, parent, boss, or friend, the emotional toll is often the same. You begin to lose sight of who you are. Behary describes how living in the orbit of a narcissist can erode your confidence in subtle but devastating ways. You start doubting your memories, your feelings, your worth. You walk on eggshells, censoring your words to avoid conflict, constantly measuring yourself against their impossible expectations. Over time, your identity becomes entangled with theirs. You become the mirror that reflects their image back to them instead of the person you truly are. This is why recovery is not only about leaving the narcissist, it's about rediscovering yourself. Behary outlines a process for rebuilding that identity through 3 key practices. 1. Reconnecting with your core values. Ask yourself, what truly matters to me? What kind of life do I want to live? Narcissistic relationships often make you prioritize someone else's desires over your own. Reclaiming your values gives you an internal compass again, one that no one else can distort. 2. Practicing self-compassion. Many survivors of narcissistic abuse carry guilt, shame, or self-blame. They think, "Why did I tolerate it for so long?" Behary reminds us that compassion for yourself is essential. You are responding to manipulation and emotional conditioning. Healing begins when you replace judgment with understanding. 3. Rebuilding healthy connections. Isolation is a key weapon of the narcissist. To heal, you must reconnect with people who validate you, listen to you, and remind you that you're not invisible. These supportive relationships act like emotional mirrors that reflect your real worth. As Behary puts it, you can't find yourself in the eyes of someone who refuses to see you. The narcissist's approval is an illusion, but your self-acceptance is real, and it can grow stronger with every boundary you draw and every truth you speak. Over time, this process allows you to reclaim your power, confidence, and joy. You begin to laugh again, make decisions without fear, and feel safe in your own presence. The narcissist's voice, once loud in your mind, grows quiet. What replaces it is your own inner voice, calm and steady, guiding you forward. Chapter 7. Building a Life Beyond the Narcissist, Lasting Healing and Emotional Freedom. In the final chapter of Disarming the Narcissist, Wendy Behary brings together all the lessons from the book into a powerful message of hope and renewal. Healing from the grip of a narcissist is not merely about survival. It's about thriving again, reclaiming your emotional independence, and creating a life rooted in peace, clarity, and self-respect. Behary reminds us that recovery is not a straight path. There will be moments when old fears resurface, when self-doubt whispers again, or when the narcissist tries to reassert control through guilt, charm, or manipulation. But each time you stand your ground with awareness and empathy, you reinforce your inner strength. To help you stay grounded, Behary offers several key practices for lasting emotional freedom. 1. Practice emotional awareness daily. Check in with your feelings, not just your thoughts. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? By naming your emotions, you reclaim ownership of them. Narcissists thrive on confusion and emotional chaos. Awareness brings you back to balance. 2. Set boundaries without apology. Boundaries are not walls, they are bridges with gates. You decide who enters and under what conditions. Behary encourages you to express limits clearly and calmly, without guilt. Saying no is not an act of aggression, it's an act of self-respect. 3. Cultivate mindful compassion. True compassion means caring for others without abandoning yourself. This mindset allows you to interact with narcissists or difficult people while maintaining inner calm. You can see their pain without absorbing it. 4. Create meaningful habits and rituals. Wendy Behary stresses the importance of building a routine that nurtures your body and mind. Journaling, meditation, exercise, or time in nature. These rituals remind you that your well-being is your responsibility and your right. 5. Surround yourself with authenticity. Choose relationships that are reciprocal and emotionally honest. The more you experience genuine connection, the less you'll tolerate superficial or manipulative dynamics. As Behary concludes, the journey of disarming the narcissist is ultimately a journey of self-liberation. When you stop trying to change them and start nurturing yourself, you take back the one thing they can never control, your inner world. You begin to live from a place of confidence rather than fear, of choice rather than obligation. You learn that your empathy is not a weakness, it is your greatest strength when balanced with boundaries and self-awareness. Freedom, Behary writes, isn't about cutting people out of your life. It's about no longer needing their approval to feel whole. And that is the heart of the book. Learning to meet narcissism with wisdom, not war, with compassion, not compliance, with strength, not submission.
Conclusion. Rising above the narcissist. Your journey to emotional freedom. As we reach the end of Disarming the Narcissist, one truth becomes crystal clear. Freedom doesn't come from fighting harder, but from understanding deeper. Wendy Behary reminds us that we cannot control the narcissist's words, moods, or manipulations, but we can control our responses, our boundaries, and our peace of mind. The power of this book lies in its compassion. It doesn't demonize the narcissist, it humanizes them, while never excusing their behavior. It teaches us to see the pain behind the arrogance, the insecurity behind the control, and most importantly, to stop letting that pain rule our lives. Healing begins when you say, I will no longer shrink myself to fit someone else's need for superiority. It begins when you listen to your own voice again, trust your instincts, and believe that you deserve relationships built on mutual respect, not domination. And perhaps the greatest act of strength is learning to forgive, not for their sake, but for your own peace. Forgiveness here doesn't mean forgetting. It means letting go of the emotional chains that keep you tied to the past. So, as you step away from the narcissist's shadow, step fully into your light. Reclaim your power. Choose peace over chaos, truth over illusion, and self-worth over approval.
Because in the end, the greatest victory isn't disarming the narcissist, it's reclaiming yourself. If this summary helped you understand the complex dance between empathy and narcissism, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thoughtful book insights. Your growth journey deserves support, and every story we explore together helps light the path to emotional freedom.